are quite worried by the involvement of a large segment of our youth in cybercrime. I can tell you that more than 60% of the arrest and prosecution that we do in the Efcc actually affects this demographic. And it's worried that some of these youngsters, some barely 17, 18, 19, are being convicted and sent to prison. And it's worried what will become of them in the future. Because at the moment, a lot of them don't realize the implication of carrying that tag as convict. It is something that will deny them a lot of benefit in future. By the way, the constitution of our nation is framed. Some of them will not be able to even aspire for a political office in the future. They will also not be able to seek employment in the public sector. I also know that most private organizations will not even recruit somebody who has left the prison, even though the prison has become a correctional center now. So that is a challenge for us in the Efcc. And we have also come to that realization that our enforcement activities alone cannot address that problem. He now believes that we have to embrace prevention in tackling the problem of cybercrime in Nigeria. How do we prevent it? Efcc alone cannot prevent cybercrime. So we need stakeholders, and that is where religious organization comes into the picture. So he was very delighted that this event gives him an opportunity to call on religious leaders to join us at the Efcc in fighting cybercrime especially. And that you can do through the messages that you deliver every Friday and Sundays in mosques and churches across our nation. And by speaking to their conscience, at least some of them will change their ways. And those who don't change, you can find a way to rehabilitate them. I know that churches and mosques have programs, attitudes that they can use in trying to reform some of these youngsters that we are worried about their future. So let me go to the presentation that my chairman allowed me to present this morning. It is my pleasure to be in your midst today and to be part of this conversation on an issue that is germane to the progress of our nation. As a deeply religious society, we believe that religious organizations and their leaders have crucial roles to play in inculcating morals, which is the foundation of integrity and accountability in the conduct of private and public affairs. On this call, permit me to appreciate the Nigeria Inter-Religious Council for extending its hand of fellowship towards me and the Efcc by inviting me to this first council meeting in 2024. I consider the faith community as one of the most critical stakeholders for us in the Efcc in fighting corruption in Nigeria. The main problem militating against the development of our nation is corruption. I think that is stating the obvious. All of us here can relate to that. It is a cat and worm which has eaten deep into the fabric of our society with attendant effects on all citizens. That Nigeria has all it takes to be the giant of Africa is a fact that is also obvious to us. In fact, from the savannah in the north to the rainforest in the south, our nation is blessed with abundant natural resources. We also have some of the brightest human beings on planet Earth. What should concern us is why these resources, both material and human, has not translated into wealth for our nation. And the obvious answer is corruption. Corruption is also what is driving our young people to embrace cybercrime. Because when we interact with them, what they tell is that they don't have opportunities. Jobs are not there, and so they have to find crooked ways to make it. We live in a country where most public officers see public office as an opportunity for accumulation of wealth. The focus is what can I get for myself and my family. It does not matter if the rest of society wallow in endless penury. The implication of this disposition is already staring us in the face. As children, most of whom has never felt the real benefit of good governance, have taken up arms against us, and no one is safe any longer. Even those who thought they had stolen enough money to last 4 generations and have built castles everywhere have suddenly realized that those castles can vanish in a moment of uncontrolled rage. We also have youths who are desperate to escape poverty and see cybercrime as a fast lane to wealth. Their exploits have soiled our country's reputation globally. Some of you who travel knows how we are treated at major airports across the world, and their victims are left in misery. So the task to ensure that we do not create an environment for the corrupt to take over our society is one that belongs to all of us. It should not be left to the Efcc alone. Because when it comes to stealing the country's wealth, those who loot our resources are united by their common greed. Their ethnic identities and religious background makes no difference to them so long as their finger is on the till. Therefore, for corruption to be meaningfully fought, it must be waged on all fronts, drawing on our collective energies to defeat a common enemy. Ladies and gentlemen, the role of religious leaders in combating corruption and cybercrime, the theme of this dialogue, is quite apt, especially against the background of waning morality in our society. It is a paradox that Nigeria, though touted as one of the most religious societies in the world, with thousands of worship centers dotting the entire landscape, we also carry that prize as one of the most corrupt societies in the world. This paradox is difficult to explain. I have gone through the books of the major religions, and there is none that does not abhor corruption. The codes and precepts of the two major religions, Christianity and Islam, are uncanny in condemnation of bribery and corruption. Yet, these practices are commonplace even among adherents of the two major religions. Religion occupies a very important place in our lives. It provides us guides on ethical and moral conduct. Attitudes and behaviors are molded by religious precepts. Religious people are also supposed to manifest intolerance for dishonest behavior. It is not only religion that shapes behavior and attitudes. I also recognize the fact that cultural values also shape our conduct. But there is a congruence on matters of probity and accountability when it comes to religion and culture. Both two have a common, they are unified in condemnation of issues like stealing, bribery, embezzlement, and other litany manifestations of corruption. Whether you are Igbo or Yoruba, Hausa or Efik, Ibira or Edo, there is no culture in Nigeria that supports corruption. I don't know of any culture in this country that celebrates people who steal resources that belongs to the community. Every culture condemns corruption. Every religion condemns corruption. So why is it that in spite of our cultural beliefs and our entrenched religious practices, corruption still remains a huge problem in our country? That is a huge question that we need to answer. About 10 or 13 years ago, that is precisely 2013, we had to go to Sokoto to interview one of the personalities present this morning, His Eminence, the Sultan of Sokoto, Saad Abubakar. That was the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the Efcc. Some of my colleagues went to interview him, and they asked him, one of the questions he was asked was what should be the role of religious leaders in the fight against corruption. And I want to quote one of the answers he gave. As Muslims, he was speaking from the Muslim background. As Muslims, religion is a way of life. Whatever we are not supposed to do is stated in my religion. Religious leaders must always preach against evil things. Religious leaders must always try to guide the followers in the right path through their weekly sermons on Friday and also by personal examples. Personal examples of religious leaders count a lot. I want to underline the words personal example, because that also carries a lot of weight. What we preach and what we practice are two issues that affect how our messages are received by the flock. The question is, how faithful are religious leaders to these rules that is excellent evidence talked about? Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that religious leaders are challenged in one aspect of their sacred duties as models of character. Because in the eyes of the flock now, some of them have come under scrutiny. It's not as if the messages are not being preached today as it used to be done in the past. Far from it, the clergy still preach morality. But the paradigm shift is that unlike the older generation, this new generation called Gen Z is not dissuaded from criminality by precepts only. They yearn for role models and mentors. Unfortunately, not many of today's preachers are living proofs of scriptures. And I say this with all sense of responsibility. Some preach against corruption, but have no scruples, yielding the front pew at worship centers to people of means whose sources of wealth are questionable. Religious titles are also sometimes given to persons of questionable pedigrees. Some of us who are Christians, for instance, will rationalize this practice by saying that Jesus Christ was friends with sinners, that he came to deliver the sick and all that are oppressed of the devil. Yet, it is also true that Christ never shied away from speaking against practices that defy the spirit. He also did not spare gamblers. The view is popular that religious leaders have become too tolerant of decadent behaviors. Of what good is the clergy who closes his eyes to the ethical rot among the flock in a bid to guarantee the steady flow of milk from congregants? What fruits are the clergy bearing this end time? Ladies and gentlemen, we need to look ourselves in the mirror and tell the truth. The failure of leadership that will very often be mourned in the political realm actually cut across. We see evidence of such failure when those who are called by God to lead the flock fail to manifest virtues that will inspire the flock to higher ideals of morality. As religious leaders, your duty and calling go beyond messages and sermons. You are supposed to be the embodiment of virtues of honesty, integrity, compassion, goodness. Only in so doing will the full essence of the messages being preached manifest in the lives of worshippers. The fact of the preponderance of delinquent conduct among otherwise pious followers of many religious faiths calls to question the efficacy of messages and sermons coming out of our worship centers. The relevance of the clergy as a moral authority is being questioned by a number of practices. Among these is the emphasis on prosperity rather than righteousness. This has created the impression that instant wealth, irrespective of how it's gotten, is approved of by God. We have seen situations where fraudsters visit worship centers to testify to the blessings of God after a breakthrough in flood. We have seen politically exposed persons climb the altars to testify about how God has used his servants to uplift them, only to be arrested for alleged fraud a week after, or a few weeks after. Men of faith also sometimes forget that as leaders, they are accountable to God and their flock. The code of governance in many faith organizations is opaque, throwing up rumors of underhand practices in the house of God, where religious leaders themselves are perceived as unaccountable and lacking in transparency. And where the code of governance is opaque, the message of transparency will be lost on the floor. Where section of the congregation also perceive the leadership as exploiting the congregation to fund their opulent lifestyle, messages of anti-corruption will also not flourish. Where the worship centers lack empathy and care for the disadvantaged, the flock may not perceive the message or may not be receptive to the messages of probity. The ambivalence of some religious leaders to speak against real or perceived corruption because the culprit is an ordained member of the congregation is antithetical to societal quest for moral rectitude. Ladies and gentlemen, for religious leaders to impact their flocks positively, there must be an alignment of the messages that they preach with the works that they do. I am a Christian, and the scripture says, by their fruit ye shall know them. Let the fruit of the altar manifest the ideals of scripture in your abhorrence of malfeasance of all kinds, and let your lifestyle project the full essence of a moral authority. Islam and Christianity of the 21st century should go beyond moral instruction into a beacon of hope for the displaced, the distressed, and the deprived. In other words, religion must not only respond to the spiritual needs of followers, but ministers to their existential challenges. And all of us can reckon with the fact that we are in a challenging environment as of today. Some of the young people that have embraced cybercrime, as I've said in passing, were forced into criminality by desperate poverty. Such souls would have been steered on the path of rectitude through scholarships and other grants by faith-based organizations. For this segment of the population, our religious organizations must play a more active role in their rehabilitation through entrepreneurial and mentorship programs. I must acknowledge that a lot of faith-based organizations are already doing this, which is marvelous, because the commission and government alone cannot achieve this. We need religious leaders, religious organizations to intervene in helping to rescue these young people from the path of perdition, because involvement in cybercrime is not sustainable. They may be making money, they believe they are making money now, but such money cannot take them through their lifetime, and nobody lives on criminality for a lifetime. So we need to join hands together with Efcc and other anti-corruption agencies to ensure that faith organizations play this crucial role. It's a historical role for faith-based organizations. I recall from my generation, some of us whose parents were not really rich in our days, who go to mission school, sometimes free. Once you are a bright kid, you are sure of getting scholarship in a mission school. And that takes a lot of pressure away from your parents. But I know that so many of our churches and mosques have mission schools now, but how many of those schools are affordable? Even to members of those organizations, some of them cannot even send their children to such schools. So these are issues that we need to look at, because the church and the mosque will continue to be relevant in this fight against corruption. You are the people that are closest to every other citizen in this country, because we are a faith-conscious society. We all believe in God, whether you are a Muslim or a Christian, or even those who don't believe in these two religions, we all believe in God. And when the message of God is preached to them, it has a way of affecting the spirit man, and there is no human being that cannot change. People say Nigerians are difficult, but I know that we are all good people. And when they have people who can preach good messages to them, and you manifest the virtue that God has deposited in the clergy, they will listen to you. We believe that for the place that religious leaders occupy in the lives of their congregation and citizens, it's imperative that they must work in close alliance with anti-corruption agencies by aligning their messages, by aligning the messages from the Holy Books with the anti-corruption campaign for the benefit of our nation. Efcc has a history of partnership with faith-based organizations, and looking across the hall, I know I can recognize one or two members of the Efcc Interfaith Anti-Corruption Advisory Committee. That committee was established, I think, around 2007 during the time of Biden as chairman of the Efcc, and he's still alive today, working to see how we can collaborate with resource organizations to further the cause of anti-corruption. On 31st of January this year, a manual that was developed by that committee, the anti-corruption preaching and teaching for Muslims. The partnership between the faith organizations and the EFCC is ongoing and continuous because we are bounded by our common devotion to building a just, equitable, and transparent society where the wealth of the nation is used for the good of all. I therefore call on members of Nigerian Interreligious Council to assist the Commission in the advocacy for the use of the manual for teaching and preaching in mosques and churches. On this note, I want to thank you all for listening and wish us fruitful dedication.
Well, thank you so much.